Thank you for plugging into this Family Life News podcast, streaming issues-driven, family-focused news. And welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to what's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues. At the state capitals, they are Jason McGuire with New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms and Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Jason, let's start with you. Police reform legislation was a big deal this week in Albany. A slew of bills passing the Senate and the Assembly. The governor says he will sign them all in the aftermath of the George Floyd tragedy. Is this, in your opinion, a knee-jerk reaction, or is this a necessary measure to rein in law enforcement?
Well, I think the legislature was moving very rapidly following the murder of George Floyd. And I think this was a legislative response. The governor certainly wanted it badly. They wanted to be the first in the nation to move a so-called police reform agenda. And there are some very positive things in the package. The camera recording for New York State Police, for example, which I think actually can protect many officers. And there was not a lot of opposition to that. But there was some concern over the repeal of 50A, which really is what will make the personnel records of officers, including paid medics and paid firefighters, available to anybody who requests it. And I see that could be used as a means of harassing these first responders.
Yeah, a lot of cops say it's put a bullseye right on their backs, and they don't like it at all. Michael, it was a surreal scene. I don't know if it was Monday. Yeah, I think it was Monday, where the African-American caucus in the Democrat Party commandeered the House chamber, unfurled a Black Lives Matter banner, and then demanded police reform. I'll ask you the same question that I asked Jason. Necessary action here or knee-jerk reaction?
Well, it's a combination a little bit, I guess, especially the way that they went about it seems to be the way public discourse is now going in this country, which is to seize microphones or do even worse than that. So this went on for about an hour, disrupted the legislative session. At the end of it, the Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai, said that he would support the governor calling a special session to discuss some of the legislation that goes on. This protest that took place in the Capitol chamber violated House rules, certainly. It was led by Representative Summer Lee, a relatively new representative from the Pittsburgh area who represents Democratic Socialists there. Yeah. But it went on for over an hour. There were speeches, and then this 8.5-minute kneel down that took place when they unfurled that banner.
Yeah, and we've seen the extremes on this. I mean, you've got the cancel cop culture where there's canceling shows like Cops on television, and it just seems to be out of control. You've got cop-free zones in Seattle now, Jason. Minneapolis voting to dismantle its police force. As the country is forced to deal with this, what role do you see the faith community playing in all of this?
Well, that's why I think it's so important that churches are starting to gather again. Really, we are here for such a time as this. And this is an opportunity for pastors and the people of their congregations to speak healing into the communities. Certainly, we understand through biblical teaching and really just through the examples that are set before us that the church can lead the way in racial reconciliation. There are some serious problems in our country regarding these issues, but I believe that through Christ we can overcome those things.
Yeah. I'll ask you the kind of same thing. You had a big rally a week ago Saturday, Michael, to draw attention to this whole issue of racial reconciliation. What do you think about the faith community and how this is an important opportunity for it to get involved in this debate?
Well, I think it's important that the faith community get involved, and that's one of the reasons why our Church Ambassador Network invited pastors from across the state and around the central Pennsylvania area where Harrisburg is located to come and specifically encourage people to gather at the Capitol to pray. Mm-hmm. We really specifically said no speeches from pastors. We had an array of different demographics and African-American pastors and white pastors and others, simply to call upon God to heal our land and to guide the church in addressing these issues, the need for Jesus and for the gospel to be spread abroad. And I was very encouraged by what I saw there, especially when the Harrisburg police commissioner, the chief of police in Harrisburg, Thomas Carter, came late in the gathering and was prayed for by these pastors, and then even spoke about the need for healing and for prayer in our community.
What a moment that must have been. Let's switch gears, continuing our COVID coverage. I'm going to ask you both to give your respective governors a grade here on this. This is an important moment in the recovery, Jason. As we speak, a number of counties hopefully going into phase 3 of the 4-stage comeback plan. If you're using a baseball analogy, maybe we're in the 7th or 8th inning of this game. But when you think about the daily speeches the governor gives on this, what grade would you give him as far as his overall leadership in leading the state through this crisis?
Well, you're going to use a baseball analogy, and I'm going to say it's June, the end of school. So looking at the 2 semesters, or maybe even 4 quarters, we've got to give him different grades.
Okay.
I think in the first half, he did very well. I mean, he showed leadership. I'd give him a B+. Lately, though, boy, it's just turned into trying to maintain the national conversation when really it's past time to be reopening the state, in my opinion. Yeah. So I'm going to go with a D in the second semester.
All right. Tough grader right there in Albany. Let's ask you the same question, Michael, as far as Governor Wolf's overall leadership on this issue. I know there's a huge power struggle right now between the executive and the legislative branches of government. The Republicans want him to end the emergency. The governor says he's not going to do that and is going to check with the courts to make sure he is on constitutional good ground here. But as the counties move from red to yellow to green here, what grade would you give Governor Wolf and his overall leadership during the pandemic?
Well, if we're doing the semester or the quarters as Jason just did, I guess maybe a C at the best at the front end and worse since then. The governor has used the emergency declaration to basically make himself the unilateral decider of all that happens. He's refused to collaborate with the legislature. He's refused to put himself before the media. He never, until the very last days of this, was in front of the media, did not take questions from the media except those that were emailed to him. No follow-up questions, no working with the legislature. And then when you look at what happened with the nursing homes, when you looked at the fact that he let the abortion industry continue to work and vetoed every piece of legislation to deal with this crisis, I would give him a very, very poor grade.
Yeah, and in the midst of the protests and the pandemic, we've got to talk politics. Very important election coming up. But before we get to November, we've got the June primary, Jason, and a lot at stake. We see a lot of the voting done through mail now, but you are going to break some news on our program today. Voter guides are coming. Explain that.
Yeah, our voter guide will be released today, and so your listeners will probably be the first to see it. They can access it at newyorkfamilies.org or albanyupdate.com. And this is just a place where you type in your name, your address, pick your party, as we're a closed primary state. You can only vote in your particular political party. And then you'll see the ballot. The candidates will be on there, and information on the candidates as they return questionnaires. Primaries are where you choose the candidates that you want to vote for in November. So you definitely get a chance to weigh in through the primary process.
All right. And then finally, big news out of Harrisburg this week. The state's highest-ranking Republican, Speaker Mike Turzai, announcing his farewell speech earlier. I know he's been a champion of a lot of the causes that you stand up for, Michael, but just explain the huge hole he leaves, and maybe, and we've asked you this question before, is he seeing something in the tea leaves here that forced him to make this decision, or is it just purely for personal reasons? What do you think?
Well, I get to personally thank him in our office this week. He stopped by our office on the day that he made this announcement that he was going to be stepping down. I was also with him earlier this year when he made the announcement that he was not going to run for re-election, and even at that time, it was speculated that he might be leaving office even early before his term was out. The big hole that he leaves, many big holes. I will just talk about what we worked with him on, which was the sanctity of life and school choice. Even as recently as 2 weeks ago, we did a webinar with him where he addressed Christian schools across the Commonwealth, Christian school leaders and principals, encouraging them to stay strong and to resist what the governor was saying, which was possibly that the schools might close in the fall, and that would have resulted in the demise of many schools. He's been a champion on life, a champion for religious liberty, a champion for school choice, and he is going to be sorely missed.
All right, and that will have to be the last word this week, but Primary Day fast approaching in New York. Stay informed. Get your hands on one of those voter guides. Jason, where can they do that?
The online voter guide is at newyorkfamilies.org.
And for all the information going on in Harrisburg these days, lots to talk about. Michael, where can they find you?
PAFamily.org.